everyone. Welcome back from lunch. So I'm Kelly, and I work with partners like yourselves every day. I help them drive organic app growth, whether that be advising on ways to help improve install conversion or best practices to drive subscription revenue. So prior to my current role, I was a product marketing manager at Google, where I was responsible for a lot of our growth efforts for DoubleClick, including leading our user acquisition and lead conversion strategy. So in this session today, I want to talk to you about best practices to creating sustainable user growth. And I also want to share with you some examples from other top developers and ways that they've approached growth. But before we get started, it's important to understand that not all growth is created equal, as I'm sure you know. But what distinguishes a successful company's efforts over another? There's nobody better to talk about this topic than Sarah Teville. Sarah is a partner at Greylock. She was an early investor in Pinterest. She invested in them when they were only a 5-person company and later joined to lead their product efforts. Sarah has invested and worked with numerous successful companies, both in Silicon Valley and around the world, and I'm thrilled that she's agreed to come talk to us and share these insights with us today. After Sarah's presentation concludes, I'll rejoin her on stage to talk to you all about how to tactically implement some of these insights to drive long-term app growth. It is my distinct honor to now welcome Sarah on stage.
Hey, you guys, how's it going? All right. So today I'm going to take a stab at answering a question that I know as a VC I think about a lot. And many of you who are either already part of these billion-dollar companies, going to start one day, or on the path to building one, like how do you do it? And specifically, like, look, how do you build a billion-dollar business is really freaking hard. There's no recipe for it. But what I'm going to answer, and I think pretty definitively, is how do you maximize a product that you do have to become one of these enduring billion-dollar companies? This is something that we think about a ton at Greylock. It's our job to find these companies very, very early on, figure out the ones that have potential by looking at the product, and see that they actually have what it takes to become one of these multi-billion-dollar companies. So just to speak a little bit to the track record, I don't know how many of you guys know of Greylock, but there are 5 companies that were founded after 2000 that are now worth more than $10 billion in the public market, and Greylock has invested in 4 out of 5 of them, and we're talking like super early stage, Series A, Series B. So this is something that we really take seriously. And just to give a few examples, so Facebook, early on, we were investors when it was just, still a college-only community. LinkedIn, we invested in even earlier than Facebook when it was just, a pretty small community of, a little over 1 million members. And just so you guys know, this thing isn't, it's not on my slides. Airbnb, we invested in the Series A, so super early on, like before it became one of these, the company that it is today. And it's also my story. So when I was at Bessemer, I was investing early stage Series A, Series B companies, and met the Pinterest team when it was this small 5-person company, 30,000 registered users, and just got so excited about the company that I ended up joining it, and was there for about 3.5 years before joining the Greylock team. And so got to see the company go from 30,000 registered users and kind of like this kernel of a product to it's actually 150 million monthly active users that it is today. And what I've come to realize is that what it comes down to is understanding how engagement works in your product. So, we think about engagement as like this, users are just kind of engaging with our product and they're just using it. But what I've come to realize is that you can think of users as basically putting fuel or energy into your product. And then the key to becoming one of these, enduring billion-dollar companies is to take that fuel and turn it into something that actually powers your company forward. And what I've come to realize is, the way I think about this now is basically a hierarchy. And so what I'm going to do through this presentation is I'm going to talk you through this hierarchy and what, like, some of the things that you guys can be thinking about if you want to, like, take the product that you have now and really push it to the next level. And so the first level, which I'll talk about, is this idea of growing engaged users. So how do you know, we talk about growth all the time, but what's the type of growth that we should be focused on, and how do we make sure that we're encouraging that growth? Then I'll talk about just retaining users. And I'll finish it off with talking about how to make your product self-perpetuating, how to find and create virtuous loops in your product that is really what will propel your company forward. And I think, like, if you can really focus on these three levels, you're going to maximize your chances of building one of these companies. So let's talk about the first level. So I'm sure you guys all hear, about growth hacking. And this has become like the topic du jour in Silicon Valley, at least, which is like, oh, I need to hire a growth hacker. How are we going to increase downloads? What are we going to do to increase monthly active users? And what you end up seeing, and I see this especially from the VC seat, is that there are a lot of companies that figure it out. They grow their downloads, they grow their monthly active users, and then it kind of collapses. Like, not all growth is created equal. And what matters is not growing downloads. It's not growing, like, the top line metrics. What matters is growing people that are completing what I call the core action. And so you can think of that the core action is like the foundational action in your product. Like, there should be one. You should figure out what that action is, what you ultimately want your users to do that creates the foundation of your product, and then you optimize the heck out of it to, like, really get users to do it. So for Pinterest, we realized that pinning was ultimately the core action, that if we did discovery right on Pinterest, if we gave you the right pins, that you would, like, save those pins to your boards, and that creates, like, this incredible flywheel within the company. Twitter obviously was tweeting. YouTube, like, the very innovation that they had early on was figuring out how to make it super simple to get content into YouTube, which created this, like, incredible self-fulfilling prophecy for them. And when you think through what your core action is, it's really important to really play through the product roadmap that it creates. So, like, I think about Pinterest, and if we had chosen click-throughs as our core action, or if we had chosen actually original pinning, so going from outside of Pinterest and pinning things into Pinterest instead of repinning things from within Pinterest, the company would look completely different now. So you really have to be very thoughtful and intentional about choosing your core action. But if you are growing your company without growing people completing the core action, like this, I can't emphasize this enough because I know we made this mistake early on at Pinterest. It's like empty calories. Like, you feel good for a while because you see this, like, top line metric going up, but at the end of the day, you're left really with nothing. And so what you should be tracking is not the lowest common denominator, it's tracking the people that are actually completing this core action for you. And it just optimizes you, it focuses you on the right things. And then ultimately, the question you have to ask yourself is, the core action that I have, is the motivation for my users going to be high enough to do it, or is it easy enough to do? And there's some function of this, I don't know if any of you guys know Nir Eyal, but he talks about this. This is a BJ Fogg model, actually, a behavior model. But I think that there's something really to it, which is that you have to motivate your users to get them over the trigger if you want your product to grow to a large enough user base. So then let's talk about the next level. So let's assume you've got, like, you guys all here must have this already, which is that you've got a growing base of engaged users. Now, what ultimately matters, like, more than anything is getting those users to stick. Because, look, like, I see this all the time. There's, these two imaginary companies, Company A and Company B. Company A, as you can see, is growing twice as fast as Company B. So the founders of Company A feel fantastic. But they've got 80% monthly retention. It's not that bad, losing 20% of their users every month. Whereas this other company, Company B, is only losing 5%. And so what happens in the first 6 months is that company A, like if I invested in company A, I'd be like, yeah, killing it, made the right call here. But I'm sure you guys all know how to do math. Like what ends up happening is that after about 12 months, and in this like random example that I give, the lines cross, because ultimately what happens is that you're only growing the number of people that you're losing every month. And so you don't want to have this kind of like what's that expression, the empty bucket, or the bucket with a lot of holes in it? You guys know what I'm talking about? Leaky bucket. So you don't want to have the leaky bucket. So how do you keep on making sure that how do you make sure that you're part of the company B retention number, not the company A? And the way that I think about that is with what I call accruing benefits and mounting loss. So accruing benefits, the idea there is that you want your users to add data into your product, either explicitly or implicitly, and then you want to kind of recycle that data back to the user in a way that creates more value for them. So like when I'm on Facebook and I engage with content on my newsfeed, Facebook's taking all that implicit and explicit data and using it to increasingly personalize the newsfeed for me and making it a more engaging product. And whether it's like what I click on or even who I add as a friend, Facebook uses all of that to kind of create these accruing benefits. And the flip side is that you should have a user say, the more I use the product, the more I have to lose by leaving the product. That you create this experience where I, as a user, start to depend on your product. I'm leaving artifacts of myself in the product, so it almost becomes an extension of my identity. Or it's certainly just something where I rely on it in some way. And so to give my favorite example, I mean, how many of you are Evernote users or Pocket? I'll call out Pocket here also. Like, how many of you are Evernote users? Like, I don't know about you guys. Like, I'm freaking obsessed with this product. Like, every time there's bad news about Evernote, I like have like this like, what's going to happen to this company? Because I have everything in Evernote. Like, it has such accruing benefits and mounting loss for me that I just find myself putting more and more content into Evernote, because now when I do a search, I just know that it's everything for me. It's just going to get better and better. And I really, like, my LTV is infinite, and I actually pay the subscription just to make sure that it stays around a little bit longer, because that's like my greatest fear. You know, Pinterest too. Like, so when I was at Pinterest, I was leading product for our discovery team. And the thing that I obsessed over was, how do I take the action that my users are doing and return that back to them in a way that creates both the accruing benefits and mounting loss? And what you find is that ultimately, now on Pinterest, I hope all of you are Pinterest users. If you're not, please sign up after today. It'll make me feel like it's the job well done. But what you see on Pinterest is that you've got both this mounting loss, which is that you have your boards, and it's all your bookmarks, it's your recipes, it's your favorite articles, it's inspiration for a trip you want to do or what you want to wear. And then your home feed becomes more and more personalized for you, because what we do is when you pin things to a board, we use that to personalize recommendations for you in your home feed. So if I just bought a new home, now my like home feed is all about the home decor that I'm thinking about for my empty place with just a bunch of boxes. And so that's the idea with Pinterest. There's a flip side to this. There are plenty of companies that don't get through level 2. So one of the companies that, I don't know if any of you guys ever use any of these anonymity apps like Whisper or Secret. Like, I remember when Secret came out, it was like so much fun. Everybody was like adding secrets on it. We were all making fun of each other. You were like finding out the Silicon Valley gossip. But then what happens is that you delete the app because you kind of feel bad about using it. And then someone says like 2 months later, hey, did you see that secret in Secret? And you're like, shit, okay. So you download Secret again, you install it, and you see the secret that the person's talking about, and your product experience is not any different at that moment in time than it was 2 months ago, or if you had been using the product for 2 months. Because there's no concept of identity. There's no concept of accruing benefits or mounting loss for me. On the other hand, Twitter actually has anonymity. Like, that's what's creating so many of the problems that they have right now, actually, around trolling and other things. But the reason that they have accruing benefits and mounting loss is because they have persistent identity. You know, you can create a fake account which accomplishes some of the part of anonymity, but because I accrue my followers and the people I follow, I have my likes, I have everything else, they actually can have retained users with anonymity at the same time. And so let's talk level 3, because this is the hardest level. I think if any of you guys are growth people, you're probably thinking about some of the loops here. And so the idea is, you know, you've got this growing user base, whether it's growing through word of mouth, it's growing through PR, whatever is causing you to grow. And you've built a product that retains those users. You've got accruing benefits, you've got mounting loss. People feel like the more I use a product, the better it gets, the more I have to lose by leaving it. And now the question is just whether you can create virtuous loops in the product, because this is what really, I think, takes a company from, you know, being, you know, a solid player to being one of those iconic companies. The strongest virtuous loop that I'm sure many of you guys hear about all the time is a network effect. And so at Pinterest, we discovered our network effect through our kind of process of creating the discovery team, which is this very simple idea, which is that when a user pins a pin, they either bring a new website, a new piece of content into Pinterest, or they're actually creating a new edge in our graph by putting that pin on their board. And what we do then is we take that data of like, this user put this pin on this board, here are all the other pins that share a board with that pin. Therefore, those are all edges in our graph. And we use that information to make the discovery experience better, which gets more people to pin and engage with the product, and you've got like this wonderful virtuous loop. And there are other types of virtuous loops, though, that you're always going to be searching for in your company. So, you know, growth is a great one. So actually, one of the things that our growth team was always thinking about was people are completing these actions already on Pinterest. And how do we take advantage of the ripples that they can create? So as an example, you know, I use this example of sending a pin here. But I think even a better example is that, you know, each pin on Pinterest has been repinned thousands of times, if not like on average millions of times. And that means that if I find a pin that there's a recipe, like a pancake recipe that I discover in search, I could show the person who pinned it be like a super engaged user who's already getting notifications all the time. Or I could show it like a user who hasn't come to Pinterest for 2 weeks. And if I pin that pancake recipe, they get a notification, whether it's a push notification or an email telling them, hey, Sarah pinned your pin. Come see where she pinned it. Come see the other pancake recipes that she likes. So, and that's like an example of re-engaging the user. So look, like these are really hard to create. There are so many companies that try to create virtuous loops and just struggle to. Unfortunately, Evernote, my favorite company, is one of those companies. So I don't know if any of you guys have ever tried to do one of their shared notebooks. It just doesn't work. Like all the time when I accidentally press the chat button, when really I want to create a note, it drives me crazy, but it's Evernote trying to create virtuous loops in their product. But ultimately, it's really a single player mode product. You know, Tinder is another example that I love to make fun of. So Tinder actually has some of those re-engagement loops. It has some of the growth loops, which is that if we match, Tinder sends a notification to you letting you know, hey, Sarah, swipe left on you. The problem that Tinder has, and this is what all dating sites have, is that if you match with someone, and the reason I make fun of Tinder is because we don't actually know this is what happens on Tinder, but ideally you match with someone, you have a successful date with someone, and that's an off-ramp from the experience. That's not actually making the experience more engaging or kind of creating a stronger loop. And so Tinder has to constantly figure out how do we get people in the top of the loop to keep them dating. And so as I said, ultimately, the strongest fuel you can have for your company is your users doing things in the product, engaging with it in such a way that they're making the product stronger, both for themselves and for other people in the company or in the product, and they're also figuring out how to re-engage your users and grow the product for you. And so last but not least, how do you measure this? How do you know if you're on the right track? So we've talked about these three things, each of the levels in the hierarchy. And so, I as an investor, but I imagine you as a product manager or a GM or the CEO of your company ultimately wants to see these three things also, which is am I growing? Are users getting more or less engaged over time? So the users I got, I brought to the site 1 year ago versus now, what percentage of them are engaging with the product? Are we getting better over time, or are we getting worse? Are the cohorts growing? Are we retaining them? And ultimately, how am I doing on my marketing spend? Are we getting people through the funnel? And so the thing that I think is the number one thing to measure, and everything else, in my view, is a waste of time, is looking at cohorts. And so you look at cohorts, does everybody know what a cohort is? Okay, good. I'm getting some nods. But the cohort is just all the users who joined January 2015. And you track those, you kind of tag those people, and you watch them month to month just as their own cohort of users. And you see how many of them every week or every month are completing your core action, and what percentage of them are actually completing the core action. So you're getting a sense of both how many people are the absolute value, how are they retaining, and whether over time your product's getting better at converting the new people that sign up into people that are actually engaging with the product. And so what you see is those three things that I already talked about. It's like the distillation of every other metric that you could possibly track. And everybody has a different way that they like to show it. If you're an early stage startup or just getting started with a new app, I love line graphs. I just find it's the easiest way to look at it at a glance and really understand what's happening with the company. But the bigger you are, the further you are in your kind of user growth and maturity, the more you end up going to the left. And so I think ultimately, if you're able to track your cohorts, you're able to communicate the value of what you're doing, both to an investor, if you end up coming down this path eventually, or already have, or anybody else in your company. So just to close it out, we talked about the three things in the hierarchy. We talked about what it is, growing an engaged user, what you actually look for, what is an engaged user, focusing on the core action. We talked about the importance of retaining those users, making sure that you don't have a leaky bucket. And then figuring out ways to make the product self-perpetuating. And I think that if you are able to build your product to kind of check the box and really excel on these three levels, I think you've done everything you can from a product perspective to maximize your chances of becoming one of these iconic companies. And so just, to close again, the biggest thing I want you guys to take away is that engagement, which is this energy that your users are putting into the product. And it's kind of like the wind blowing or the water. If you don't put the windmill or the dam, you're just kind of losing it. This energy is there in the product, and you're not taking advantage of it. But if you take advantage of it right, it becomes this just this fuel for your company. And that's it for me. So thanks so much, you guys.
Thanks, Sarah. Those were great insights that you shared. So there's no doubt that growth is incredibly complex, and it's certainly not a one-size-fits-all model. What works for one company might not work for another. But as Sarah touched upon, it's essential that growth is core to your product design and that it's not an afterthought. Thankfully, although growth is complex, we can think about it in a structured way, just so you know that they're off. We can think about it in a structured way. So today, what I want to do is share 3 areas that you can focus on to optimize for sustainable growth. You're one behind. Same as you. So the first area is to identify high-value users, because not all users are created equal. You want to ensure that you're attracting the right users to your app. The second is to optimize for growth. This includes both your paid and organic channels. But core to this is ensuring that you have proper measurements set up so that you can track your growth efforts and see what the outcome and impact is of them. And lastly, you want to build a culture around growth. It's important that your team embodies a growth mindset, keeping in mind that your efforts aren't always about succeeding. Sometimes the best lessons can be learned when your team embraces and learns from failure. So first, let's talk about your audience. As you create and refine your product, you need to know who your audience is and what they like so that your core product value can meet their needs. The same is true for your growth strategy. Knowing who your high-value users are and focusing your growth on this segment will allow you to ensure that you maximize your return on your growth investment. Sure, you could focus your efforts on achieving massive, fast growth, but if those aren't the users, as Sarah touched upon, that are meeting your KPIs, then you might be using your resources inefficiently. So what makes a valuable user is very specific to your app and goals, and so I recommend that you segment your users into cohorts so you're able to track your most valuable users, see the way that they're behaving in your app, and subsequently find more users like them. One solution, and one of my favorite tools to doing this that was mentioned earlier, is Firebase Analytics. Firebase Analytics will allow you to track an unlimited measurement across 500 event types, across your iOS app and your Android app. And it's free, and who doesn't love free? It's user-centric audience segmentation rather than focusing on sessions. And you track engagement, actions, and key metrics that matter to your business. Now, there's a lot of features that I can talk about with Firebase. It's a pretty awesome product. I don't want to bore you, though, so check it out if you're interested. Now, let's deep dive into some of the tools and techniques that top partners have used to optimize and ensure sustainable growth. So it's no secret that there's a plethora of ways to reach your most valuable user. And as a prior marketer, I was constantly frustrated with the amount of channels that you could use to reach the users. And it can be confusing as to which ones you should be optimizing at which time. So I just briefly want to talk to you about several organic channels that we think you should be optimizing and some paid channels that you may want to consider. So user reviews are a great place to start. They are a great source for understanding how users feel about your app, what features they love, and even what functionality they'd like to see from your app. You can use these insights to craft a store listing that will attract the optimal user. Accompanying reviews, though, is of course your rating. And oftentimes, developers will ask me for tips on how they can improve their rating. Now, in addition to improving the quality of your app, if that's something that you need to do, one of the best ways to increase your rating is by replying to reviews. In fact, we have measured that users who update their rating after a developer has responded to their comment will update their rating on average 0.71 stars. And we all know the difference between a 4-star app and a 4.7-star app. Now let's put this into context. This isn't dissimilar to the way that you would make a choice in your everyday life. Let's say tomorrow is Friday, you're feeling in the mood for Indian food, you fire up your favorite food discovery app, and you see that there's two near you. One has a 3.3-star rating, and one has a 4-star rating. But you also see that the restaurant owner is responding to restaurant goers' reviews. Right away, I personally would choose the 4-star rating, and I would hope I'd have a great experience. So with these insights gained from user feedback, it's important to ensure that your Play Store listing quickly and accurately reflects who it's for and what your app is about. But how do you know it's working? With a deep understanding of your audience, you can A/B test different elements and make data-driven decision on which context drives the most favorable results. Take, for instance, your app icon. Your app icon is the first thing that users see when they go into the Play Store. So you want to make sure that it's high quality and indicative of your app's primary function. So let's take a look at Spryfox. They're an indie game app developer. They use store listing experiments to test their app against 3 different variants. They started off with this cute little ninja bear, and they tested it against these 3 variants. So with a show of hands, how many of you think variant number 1 performed better with regards to converting more users? 3 people? Variant number 2? All right. Variant number 3? Awesome. Wow, it's interesting to see the breakout in the room. Variant number 1 got no love. So drum roll, please. Variant number 3. They actually saw almost 18% higher install conversion rate. And they simply removed the red from the app icon. Now, I must admit, when I first saw this, I actually thought the control would perform better, and I see hundreds of these in my role. So I think this just goes to show that there's absolutely a time and place to trust your gut, but sometimes your instincts can be wrong. And that's where testing can really help out. Here's another great example from Instacart. I assume most of you are familiar with Instacart, but if you're not, they're a grocery delivery service. They experimented with their app description. Their original short description read, groceries from stores like Whole Foods, Safeways, or Costco delivered in 1 hour. So they're using major brands, and they're highlighting the fact that they have fast delivery. Seems like a great short description. So they tested against the variant, on-demand grocery delivery from your favorite local stores. First delivery free. There's free again. But let's see what the outcome was. They saw a 14% increase in installs by the second variant. This just goes to show that testing your store listing elements can result in highly favorable outcomes for you. So those are a few ways that you can optimize your store listing. But what if you want to get more traffic to your site in a cost-effective way? So Share the Meal was featured in our opening video today, and as a nonprofit, they aren't able to spend on user acquisition. So they rely on PR as a sustainable strategy for them. These best practices have ensured that well over half of their installs have been driven by media coverage. Some of the tips that they shared with us are that TV works best, but print is useful as a catalyst. Amplify your success by combining with celebrity outreach and partnerships. And this is really influencer marketing. If you can have a celebrity or somebody that's an influencer in the area that your product is, then this can yield great dividends for you. But lastly, it's not easy to measure the impact. And as a product marketer, I was faced with this several times. We launch many products as Google, as you know, and so sometimes we would launch products and they would get picked up by press. And so when I would go to talk about my impact as a marketer, it was very hard to track ROI. And sometimes I would have to track Twitter impressions or click-through rates, so that can be suboptimal. However, it can yield great results if you do get press and you do get that awareness. So another element to think about is viral mechanics within your app. So Sarah touched on this in great lengths, and she also mentioned that creating those viral loops is incredibly hard. But if you do it well, it can yield great dividends for your app. How many of you are familiar with Dub Smash? Just a couple of people. Okay, so Dub Smash is a social video messaging app. It's hugely entertaining. You basically record yourself, dub smash yourself against lip singing to a song, and then share it with your friends. And oftentimes, friends or people you share it with will go on to download the app as well. So I highly recommend you check it out if you haven't. Dub Smash has seen great growth thanks to viral mechanics, and sharing is core to the functionality of their app. Dub Smash actually, when you share a video, they have their watermark on every video so that it raises awareness of their brand even if you don't have the app installed. So even if sharing isn't currently a key component of your app, there are a few things that you can do to drive virality. The first is increase the number of additional users that a single user invites to your app. There's a lot of ways to do this, and it's very specific to your app. Some of them could be app invites, social sharing, giving incentives to users, but I encourage you to see if it works for your app. And secondly, offer more opportunities for users to share throughout their journey within your app. This will reduce the cycle time that more users come into your app, both of which can help kickstart viral growth. Another organic channel to take advantage of is cross-promotion. Cross-promotion can be a great tool to help accelerate the launch of a new product. For example, Freeletics, the creators of the body weight training app, use cross-promotion to raise awareness of their free Lytics nutrition app that they were launching. They surfaced meal advice, as you can see here, within the activity stream of their body weight training app. This and other cross-promotion activity drove 96% of all nutrition app sales in the launch week. You can see how optimizing some of these channels, from responding to reviews to optimizing your Play Store listing and taking advantage of organic channels such as PR, cross-promotion, and building in viral mechanics, can have a favorable outcome. But once you've done several of those things, you might want to consider driving more traffic to your Play Store by using paid acquisition. Last year alone, there were over 65 billion installs on the Play Store. We match the best apps with the best users. We run personalized collections and seasonal promotions. Still, the #1 driver of installs on Play is search. One way to ensure that you are there in the moment when a user is searching for your app or an app like yours is to use AdWords search ads on Google.com and Google Play. For example, Get is a taxi app. They wanted to drive installs and get higher quality users, not just any users, but specifically targeting high quality users to their app. So they used AdWords search ads on Google Play to find users that were actively searching for a taxi app. With this campaign, they exceeded average ROI by 150% month over month. It was cost effective, 60% lower cost per install, and it drove 30% of all installs were generated by these Google campaigns. Another option to find more users you want is universal app campaigns. These campaigns make it easy to promote your Android and iOS app across Google's top properties, whether a user is searching on Google.com, on Google Play, or within a third-party app, or watching a video on YouTube. Unlike AdWords campaigns, you don't design individual ads for universal app campaigns. Instead, we use your text ideas and assets from your App Store listing, and we create a variety of ads. All you need to do is supply text, your starting bid and budget, and the location and languages you'd like to see the ads in. Then we'll take rich data about your user actions, context, and intent, coupled with our machine learning, and to help you find users that are likely to complete a selected in-app action. If you are, for example, a hotel app, booking a room is a key event that you'd like your users to do. So universal app campaigns would help you find users that are likely to book a hotel room. Last critical element is to establish a culture that truly embraces growth principles. It's not enough to have a great product. You need to ensure that your teams are listening to this data and adapting the product to meet audience demands as they evolve. Let's take a look at how Runtastic, one of the leading health and fitness apps in Europe, approaches building their growth, team growth. 95% of their 76 million total installs have been generated organically. Mario, their head of growth, takes great pride in this KPI, and he views it as a direct result of their structured approach to growth. His first lesson for us was that growth is at the core of their culture. Their culture is codified in a set of principles, one of which is growth is never done. Second is that math and metrics don't lie, but they don't tell everything. And there ain't no party like a West Coast party, but a West Coast party don't stop. I'm just kidding, those are my values. I just want to wake you all up a bit. So these growth principles are how Runtastic's teams operate, how they are staffed, and what tactics they employ. This is a high-level illustration of how their PMs, designers, and engineers are instructed to collaborate with one another to make sure that they're staying true to their principles. Growth strategy is really a cross-functional endeavor. It's not enough for your product teams to be focusing on growth solely, or your marketing teams to be focusing on growth. All team members should work together to optimize for a shared KPI. And I highly encourage you to talk to other developers here today about how they approach growth and team culture. So lastly, growth can become septic in and of itself if you're not scaling your efforts. I've worked with several startups that have seen amazing traction only to not scale their efforts and lose that momentum. By flagging problems early on, by tracking progress, you can help your team stay on track to achieving your KPIs. This makes it easier to reevaluate your priorities as internal and external factors change, and we all know they do. So to reiterate, we all know that growth can be complex. And there are 3 areas that we mentioned today that you can focus on to optimize for sustainable growth. The first is start by looking at your high-level business objectives and define what growth means to you. You may have already done this, but it's worth continuously looking at. Then define actionable KPIs and build an effective growth culture and team. And third, optimize for growth by identifying high-value users and testing the elements that make sense for your objectives. And don't forget to track progress and adjust as your objectives or environment change. Thank you.